Hi there, welcome to today's episode again of the review show. I'm super excited to be your host and convener of this show, and with me on stage is Fash. Nice to have you, Fash.
Nice to have you. Thank you very much.
We also have John Cross. Nice to have you, John Cross.
Thank you.
Alright, so on today's episode, we'll be discussing The Shark. The Shark is a 2017 movie, and I believe it has been one of the most watched and also one of the most criticized movies out there. Now, we're talking about The Shark, a man who was with pain from childhood, grew up into a lovely father with 3 kids and a lovely wife, but then something tragedy happened that changed his perspective about life. And it has always been that question you always want to say, why God? You know, a whole lot of people ask that question. Why? To everything we feel in life. And this was Mack's story. But can we look down into the faith-based insight to why Mack felt like that? What really happened, and to what extent, even in our Christian life, we might have felt like that at one point or the other. And this brings us to discussing The Shark on this show today. So stay with us on this episode as we try as much as possible to reveal the insight to how Mack felt, right? And was God really there? And how God go through with us in our pain. We would like to begin with a popular statement in this movie. And that statement was made by Papa. He said something. He said, if all you see it's your pain, you lose sight of me. I kind of imagine when I was watching the movie and was like, why would God make that statement? That if all we see is our pain, we'll always lose sight of him. Does it mean that we are not even supposed to focus on our pain? Because I felt Mack has lived a life that was so much about his pain. He didn't see the other aspect of life, or maybe the other aspect of God somehow, and this has consumed him until the loss of Missy. Looking at the whole scenario of The Shark, you could tell that there were a whole lot of insight to how God uses our pain to teach us or bring us closer to himself. Now, looking at Mack's life, Ash, what will you say will be the intent of God using Missy, or maybe the tragedy that happened, to bring Mack close to him? Because I kind of like, why does that
lose another child, like a child after the whole thing? I feel like he was just moving through life with the whole luggage, baggage from his childhood and everything, and he had not healed. But you know, people just move through life. You don't know what they're carrying, but they just look good. And it's like God just wanted him to release it and free himself. I mean, he had a good heart, home and all of that, and he was still holding on to that. And somehow maybe God had to take him through that pain again. We never know why he does that, but that was his final, breakthrough to connect with God. And I feel like that was just God trying to release his burden from him, because it's like, I think in Matthew 11:28, but God says, come unto me that are weary and heavy laden, I'll give you rest. And that was why he sent that letter to him, to call him back, like, let me really. But he didn't go there for that anyways. He wanted to just go and kill the person that killed his child or whatever. But that was God calling him back, and I feel that's how God calls a lot of us back.
Many of the time, I think many of the time we receive invitations in our lives.
Yeah.
Especially from the Holy Spirit. But this time around, we could see Mack receiving literally a letter from God. When I read that letter, it said something. It said, hi, Mack, right? Hi, Mackenzie. It's been a while. Wow. Does it, when it comes to our relationship with God, takes a while for us to really know that he's there? So, cross, when it comes to our relationship with God, does it take a while for us to really do? Because looking at the letter, I was like, wait, this guy was in church last Sunday. So what does it mean, a while? A while? So what does that mean when it comes to our invitation or our relationship with God?
Yeah, you might go to church, and in our heart of hearts, we believe we are really spending time with God, but God actually measures relationship, right? Because he's the only one that has the tool that defines intimacy, right? So I can go to church, I can even be praying in tongues, even studying the Bible, but God said, awesome, I don't know you, right? Just like those guys that's in Matthew 25, where they said he will separate the sheep from the goats, and then he said, as away from me, you walk out of iniquity, and these guys were like, but feeding church, I pay my tithe, I've been giving to the poor, and I've done a lot of stuff, but God said, I don't know you. So God alone determines intimacy. As a matter of fact, Romans 8 verse 14 said, them that are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God, right? So at any point in time where our actions is not spirit mediated, there is no way that God could measure that action, right? So it's only at that point of, spirit-mediated action that God could say, okay, this is my child, this is my daughter, this is my son, and all of that. So I think Mark was overwhelmed with his own pace and with his own reality. And that alone, though he was doing a lot of stuff, but those stuff were not spirit-directed. And because they are not spirit-directed, there was no way that God could measure it, right? So that was why it looks as if the guy doesn't know God, God doesn't know him, and then that invitation have to,
Yeah. So I think I kind of like the way that invitation came because it was really pretty much so relatable, going through the snow one day and he just saw from his mailbox there's a letter from Papa, right? But let's look at Nan in this story. Nan, the wife of Mack. I think Mack was trying as much as possible to know God through Nan. So he appreciated the love Nan had for God, but he didn't want to go close. Maybe because of what he did to his father when he was little, right? So a kind of, I think Nan is like one of my favorite characters in this movie. What would you say concerning Nan's life when it comes to even she calling God Papa? That looks so relatable. Like, do you have a nickname for God?
I didn't think I have one now.
Also, okay.
I don't think I have one for now. But I mean, I think, like I said again, I feel like God really loved Mack and had to bring his wife in.
Okay.
God can love some people so much that he just brings so many good people around them, and even if they are falling, they're just there to stand in for them. So, I mean, there was a part of guilt for him killing his dad. I feel if he didn't kill his dad, he wouldn't have had that so much guilt to just be like, God, you just didn't do so much for me, because his dad hitting him and his mom and all of that. But I feel the love his wife had for him was what covered him, and that's why they always say woman's helpmate. So I think God brought somebody that could help him along the way so he doesn't fall.
Yeah, that's so true, because I remember the statement I think Dan said, one of the scenes, he was like, don't forget we love each other,
when she was in the car, right? I can't remember she said what for, but I was like, this is so...
I think that was deep.
so much, and I don't want to.
Yeah, that was deep, because I was like, yeah, I think this really take a place, because when we are so genuine in love with people, we really don't want to hurt them, because I think what Mack felt from the time he was growing up to when he lost Missy was too much, and there was only one thing that could really heal that pain. That was love and relationship. And I think on the other hand, though he didn't, maybe from the inside, he loved God, but he wasn't too expressive about it. But now was so expressive that he called God Papa. And the children were so fond about calling God Papa because, of course, yes, especially Missy. Missy was one special child, right? She asked a whole lot of good questions. She was so inquisitive to know what's up about these and all of that.
Like, in fact, I don't feel like he had a feeling when she was asking about that whole waterfalls.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't it was so
Accepted there. I noted that line, reason being that sometimes as parents, we should be careful of the kind of story we tell our children, because they can find their purpose and their calling within the lines of that story, right? Because I believe strongly, if Missy never got to know about that story, I don't think immediately the dad was telling her that story, you should
personalize it.
Yeah, she personalized the reality of that story to herself.
And she even went further to ask the questions. She was like, "We'll both ask you."
So it's something I felt so challenged by that story. Reason being that, it happens, right? Because most of the time, what we call destiny, what we call purpose, calling, and all of that, are product of knowledge and insight that we got, depending on the circumstances and all of that, right? For a little child today to say, I want to be a medical doctor, most of the time, I stand to be corrected. Nobody is actually born with anything called talent and all of that, right? Purpose is something that is unique, and, calling is unique. But when it comes to most of the things we do, career-wise, there are things that are born out of, experiences, knowledge and all of that. So, what happened to Missy is something that really touches my heart so much. And I believe if the dad hadn't shared that story with that little girl, I don't think she would have been trapped.
Yeah, so I think another way you can look at it is because the love of the father was there. Because remember, inside the car when they were going, the other the siblings were like, "Dad, have you told me about that story?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, we can't go back there. You can't be stopping at each point in time and none of that." But let's go back now to look at Max's pain, because the story will not be complete without us really explaining why Mack felt the way he did.
Yeah.
Right? So, at the point in our lives, is there that point where we feel, especially when you see a godfather? What I mean by godfather, maybe an authority over your life, that you're able to look at their life as a model to how you should pattern yours, right? Because I felt Mack maybe should have been so pained concerning the dad, right? That maybe transfer that pain to the family, but he didn't. So how did Mack really manage pain before meeting God? Remember, he was able to go. So I was like, because when you watch the movie, you listen to the narrator, he said something like, Nan and Mack has lived their life 18 years in marriage, and mostly of those ladies have been happy. How did he go through it? Because this was a guy from birth. Watch the father. The father was an elder in the church.
Yeah.
So in quotes, Mack had a high respect for the dad, right? So there was this fatherly figure he saw in the dad about God, right? Looking at Mack's life, okay, and the way he went through to manage the pain, how did he do that? Because I kind of asked myself again, how did he go through that stage? So you didn't get to the point where it had to be invited by God.
Yeah, I think people react to things differently.
Awesome.
Yeah, so take for instance people that have been raped. Some people, once they rape them, they just think that's the way of life. They keep raping every other person. But some people, once they get raped, they're like, this will never happen to any other person. They become activists. So I think his whole part, so I think his whole part was just saying, I choose to live a good life and treat my wife well. That was his own part that he went through. And I believe that's why God loved him so much. I was like, thank God you didn't use that pain to
go.
Yeah, but he was feeling that pain. He carried the pain instead of transferring it to others.
And is there a way? Now, let's look at it, because I felt, not to really criticize anything, but I felt Mack should have shared that pain with his wife, but he didn't.
I feel like an ugly past. Some people don't like to share that kind of, and the fact that he killed his dad, who wants to say? When we look at him, he said to
Say that's taking to that line, and then considering the fact that he has been able to mirror himself as a good person, as a good husband and good father, he doesn't want to bring up a story that will begin to raise, questions and all of that. And then most of the time, there are some stories you tell that even if your action is not portraying that story, you have created memory in the heart of people. So anything you do, they try to, define it based on the lens of what they have heard, right? So I think Mack was able to manage his pain big time, right? Because a lot of persons are caught in this web whereby they had a lot of negative experiences while growing up and they couldn't manage it. So practically there was a time I was passing through a very difficult moment of my life.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So it was so tough that when I reached out to my mom, I every now and then I always reach out to her. I'm like, Mommy, look at what I'm going through. Look at what I'm going through. She would categorically tell me, don't let this thing to change you. You are a good boy. Remain a good boy. You get it? So most of the time, if we don't manage our pain very well, our pains begin to define us. So you see some people want to become very tough and they said, this person wasn't like this. But something make him to become like that.
Pain.
Just like what God told Adam, who told you you are naked. So your pain has a way of teaching you. Your pain has a way of giving you a body of knowledge that begin to modulate your activities on a day-to-day basis, right? So Mack was someone that really managed his pain big time because to the extent he was able to, relate with his children, talk with his children, I'm like, man, very few guys will be able to achieve that time. Very few.
And that still brings the part of God. He could manage it based on his human capacity. But God knew that this thing was going to drown him at some point. That was why he now had to come in and say, you know what, you have tried your best. Let me help you out on this. Yeah, so there's a limit to where man can hold themselves and say everybody has to be good boy. You're dying inside. And God is the one that sees that part of that also.
And I think maybe the somehow, because the prayer of Max's wife was really going a long way. Remember, because when they had after Mack got to the shack, right? This time around, they were having dinner with God the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, portrayed in these 3 verses, right? God asked him something. He said, that was your mother's perfume, I think, in the kitchen.
Okay, my wish.
Yeah. So he said, I was especially fond of her. I think in a way, God loved, not really, God loved all his children. But he was so particular about Max's mom, right? To a point that he knew the kind of perfume Max's mom would wear. Yeah, that kind of a thing. most times I feel people don't know that God is really particular about even the details of our daily life, right?
You know,
And God was so detailed about all of this information, right? To even know what kind of perfume the mom wear and all of that. I think in a bit was trying to show Mack that, hey, I've been with you throughout this journey.
exactly.
You can't do it all alone. We are here to mend this relationship. But now let's go back to talk about when Mack came to the shack, right? Why did God bring back Mack to that place? Why? The shack was where the daughter got killed, because after looking for her for so long and all of that, they couldn't find her. The only time they could see her dress, and some blood stains and all of that was inside the shack. And this was God inviting him again back to the shack for a weekend get together. How can you be that mean?
Yeah, I think God has this technology, and he's always fond of using it throughout history, right? So if you look at the story of Adam and Eve, they were in a garden, right? And in that garden, they were defeated. Jesus Christ began the salvation of mankind from the garden of Gethsemane. Now, they ate of a tree, and through that tree, it brought condemnation. Jesus Christ died on a tree, which is the cross. You understand? So, God has a way of engineering mankind's salvation from the very stuff that brought defeat to them. Right? So, Eve brought defeat to mankind. Mary brought redemption to mankind by giving birth to Christ. So I think God has a way of doing this, and if you look throughout history, it always happened that way, right? And the reason why God do this, to the best of my knowledge, is to create association, right? Because let's say God engineered the deliverance of Mackenzie from a different platform, it might not resonate so much. Yeah, so God have to bring him back to the shack, because that is where the whole progress started from, right? And in that space, in that time, God could really perfect what he has in mind.
I know what God said. Yeah, she was.
Where you got stuck.
Yeah, he say why? Because I think Mack asked that question.
Yeah, that was
why did you have to bring me back here? Exactly. This is where you got.
This is very good stuff.
So sometimes God takes us back to the place of.
So you can open up every other thing that's happened.
Exactly.
If you just say just on your way, the thing just falls on you. There's no story around the boss. Him going back there, see this place now. Look at everything that is familiar here. What happened?
So it brings up the wound, and it is be able to heal, right?
Gradually.
I love that word, because I think all through the weekend with God in the shack, Mack was going through a flying lesson. It was both healing, it was both knowledge, it was both understanding, and a whole lot of that. But digress. Okay, not really digressing, but moving on into the scene. There was one scene that really caught my attention in that movie. Was when Mack had to go and meet Wisdom. Whoa! I think that scene blew my mind. How most times we judge and we don't really know we are making judgments. It was like even we judge everything like on a daily basis, even by the color of people's skin, by what they wear, how they enter the car, and that happens especially in Nigeria, where there's a whole lot, there's a whole lot of strife happening.
But inside all chance, you see somebody black up and like there's something fishy about this person.
Oh, so we judge the motivations of people based on how maybe the way we see them, their character, and all of that. So looking at Wisdom, or looking Mack and Wisdom in that space, what could be your maybe let me put it, what could be like maybe your summary of that scene? Because I think that scene teaches us a lot in terms of because Mack was judging, if you look at what the point, they say, okay, now today it's a very serious day. Okay, you are here to judge. I'm not the judge, because Mack was like, you already know what I did. I killed my dad, right? I killed my dad, and you already know what I did. Why will you be asking me, if? And Wisdom was like, no, today you are the judge, because you spend half of your life judging people's motivation, what they do and what they don't do, and all of that. And Mack, I think Mack was stubborn somehow to a point, because there was like, come and sit down.
Imagine someone tell you come and judge, and then you still have the courts to go sit down, to go do that, yeah.
And he took the judgment seat, and they started showing him all the problems of the world. I think God is really busy. Yes.
God is busy doing a lot.
Doing a lot, because he looks at the ends of the earth and still judges man faithful. So let's talk about that scene, Fash. What did you like? What could you really get from that scene? Let me hear your perspective about it.
I think in general, I just feel like everybody does that. subconsciously. There's a way you know God that if some people don't do what you're doing, like, just like people that don't wear earrings because their church said so. So if you wear an earring, they don't want to see what's in your heart. It's just not the way she's dressed. They just judge immediately. So I believe people judge from their own personal ideology of how God should, I don't know, Christianity should be and all of that. And so because he had gone through all that pain, like, he just thought that he had the right to tell people how their life should be. It shouldn't be so. And God now bringing him to that position of judging, like, let's see what you'll be doing, thinking you're the perfect one and all of that. It's just the same way that I said, there was a sermon I listened to, and they said Job went through all that. Yeah, he was a righteous man, but there was just one thing that was missing, that he was proud. Nobody knew that he was proud. We just knew he was a faithful man on that, but God wanted to fix that particular thing of him. He had, I have all these things, I know God, so nothing can happen to me. And all that thing happening to him was like, God, I've done a lot for you. Why should you put me through all this? So too much confidence. Not like you shouldn't have confidence in God, but don't think things can happen, and that doesn't make God has changed. So I think God put him through that whole process to work on him. I told you it's a gradual process, so I feel like God has touched every single thing before he woke up again, and it's like, I'm better now.
Awesome. So, John, first looking at that very cell, because I think the whole part of that movie rested on that scene.
Yeah.
Right? Rested really on that scene. You could see if he had to bring the kids, right? How will you judge them? So what would be really, really your summary on that scene?
I think what God was trying to achieve in the life of Mack at that point is to open his eyes to see things from his own angle, right? Because most of the time we say what we say about God because we are not seeing stuff from his own point of view.
Okay.
Right. So Mack, he has lived his life, and all his experiences have formed the bulk of his reality at the moment. So, and that reality award him to be a father, right? And all of those things happen to him. So he has the patch, right, to be able to say this person is good, this person is bad. Just like every other person said, you see a medical doctor can look at a person report and say, well, within the next 3 months you'll be dead. You get the point? Why is that person saying that? Why is the doctor saying that? He's saying that from what? Experience and from knowledge, right? So when you look at somebody and you say this person is good, you are not just saying that because you think you just want to say so. You are saying that from the body of knowledge that that regulates your thinking pattern and then the experiences you have as well, right? So God was just trying to recalibrate his mindset, right? Because if you have to judge people based on what you know, what you don't know, and all of that, you might end up judging the world wrongly.
That's true. It's not really judge the world, because he judged both the father, he judged even the father and he birth to his father. He judged the man that adopted this easy. Again, he judged them and even judged the father and all of that. And, according to wisdom, it was like, doesn't the level of brokenness still trace back to God? From Adam, then again back to God. It's not still our fault. And Matt was like, yes, of course, God is to be blamed. This thing, God has been, especially when he knows that to happen, why does he keep allowing it to happen to her? So maybe before we leave the show, why did God allow it to happen? Is his intention that we should go through this form of evil? Because, yeah, I know, of course, we've answered the question and all of that. He's faithful with that. But many people will really get a whole lot of answers out of the show. So why does he really allow evil to happen?
I feel like it's a lot of things. Sometimes it's a test, and sometimes it's just to show you that you're beginning to fall, so you should retrace your steps back. I take it as just when you're in school, every day is easy. You are used to the routine of having this class, and then they give you a test. You don't know what to expect. I mean, you're bred, but you do, and then you see some things, you're like, how am I going to get this? And some people end up failing because they're not, they realize what they thought they knew, they didn't know it. So I think sometimes it's like a test of our faith. You say you want to go spiritually, you think you just graduate to become a pastor, should go through tough times, because as a pastor, you're no longer fighting principalities and powers for your family again. It's for a whole lot of people, like people are under you now. So you are trying to win souls for God. I think they will just like looking at you. So it's like a way of moving forward. So for God to know that Casey is ready for this position he says he wants and all of that. So I think from the test aspects, that's how God does it. And sometimes to reveal that something else is missing. Yeah, Like sometimes we're just, like you said, we're going to church every day praying, but we don't know that spiritually we're down. Like the fan is going up gradually, you know, till it goes up. So before it goes up, God's like, I need you to see. And so when something happens, you're not questioning, how did this happen if I've been going to church? And that's how you check yourself and realize it's your head swipe.
So I think Mark was really, really checking himself up to answer the question why evil really exists, right? Because you see, I love what God the Father said there. He say, you see all of these similar situations in your life, you know, I am in the middle of it working good, even for yourself, like even for us.
Sadly, that's one thing I wanted to point in here, because, okay, how do you know this state is evil? You understand? We know things. You get a point, because the Holy Spirit have to ask Mark this very question: what is the division of good and evil? Yeah, so what we actually define as evil might not necessarily be evil in the sight of God.
That's true.
You get a point. So yeah, let's say there might be an environmental disaster and we say this is evil, but is that really evil? You got the point. Someone died and then we say, wow, this is evil. Is that really evil?
Exactly.
You got the point. So, you know, we define things, and that also make us judge. And that was one of the reasons, one of the major stuff that God was trying to correct in the life of Mark, right? The Holy Spirit is asking, what is your definition of good and evil? He said, anything that benefits me is good. Anything that harms me is evil. You get the point? So,
For how much can we even live to judge?
you get the point. So, for the fact that this thing hurts me, doesn't really make it evil. You get the point? Yeah, but it's the nature of that stuff to be the way it is. But you were hurt by it, and then you say this thing is evil. But it's not evil. So that's why in all, God says what? All things work together for good, to them that love Him and to them that are called according to His purpose. So life is very dynamic, and most of the definitions and the wordings we give to stuff are not really what they think. Yeah, so yeah, it's very tricky.
That's true. As we could relate back again to the garden, right? When God the Holy Spirit now sorry took Mark to the garden, and it was like, what did you see, Mark? And Mark was like, well, what was his first statement now?
Exactly.
Yeah, I see it was beautiful. And she was like, that was not the word you're there, right? So yeah, but so it really shows how immense we could be in our lives, but trusting God gives us that ability to be a perfect working process, right? A perfect working process. Like looking at Jesus with Mark on the lake, you could see what happened there. Mark was really drowning in sin. He was drowning so much that he didn't know that he was drowning. And just like you said, Fash, you're talking about how sometimes we don't even see that this is how far we've gone. The fan can be blowing. We don't really know that that's how far we've gone. And sometimes it might be because of pain. It might be because of sin. It might be because of maybe societal decadence, things that are happening around us. And most times because we are carried away by it, we always throw our eyes off Jesus. But this was Jesus again coming to tell Mark, hey, you look at me. I think on a daily basis, as we live our lives, we need to try as much as possible to focus on the one who created us and not the things he created. Because the things he created has shifted us so much out of him that we now feel these things are superior to who even created us. And that was what Mark was really going through. And because he didn't maybe allow Nan to really come through to see this, because I felt Nan had maturity with God.
Yeah, probably if she was given an opportunity, giving opportunity into the story of Mark, she would have really brought more like studier perspective to some of the stuff that Mark was battling with, but he kept those parts to himself. And even if you look at it, when Missy asked him some very, very strategic ways, he's the one who gets home, mom, in the bed, it's just there. Yeah, that's the reality about life. Sometimes when God wants to bring redemption to a particular person, he ensured that man or that woman is surrounded by people that could fulfill help. But if you have been so pained, it becomes very difficult for you to even open up to people. That's right. So I think the old people God put around Mark didn't make good use of them. So God have to state that. You get the point. Just like what God tried to accomplish with the prophets, the pastors, and all of that, and nothing would happen. He have to send his own son, which is himself, to come and me. So that has just been the way.
Christ has really paid everything for us. As we try to bring the show to a close, we really need to every day, on a daily basis, see the need to go back to him. And while we go back to him, we allow him to be the defining factor of how our life should be lived or what it should be based on, because sometimes we make rash judgments, so rash that we don't even know the consequences of what our judgments are. And sometimes if we are not careful about life, we go through a whole lot of things, and these things can define our perception, can define our mood, can define our activities, can define who we become, and all of that. So it's been nice having you guys watch us this live wherever you're watching from, and we'll be super excited that we're able to bring this movie to even try as much as possible to review it. Now we are not reviewing movies to get or criticize what was done in the movie, but to bring our faith-based insight, things that could enrich you to maybe go back to sit down and reflect on the issues you yourself you're going through. It might be going through one circumstances, maybe one pain or the other, just like Mack did. But just like Mack, we must learn to forgive. The forgiveness for Mack was his redemptive power. Immediately he was able to let go of the man who hurt him the most. He got the healing of God instantly. And that took a process until God said, whatever matters to you, Mack, it matters to us. And Mack coming back to life was an awesome time. He lived as free as he could ever be and all of that. So sometimes you might be going through all of those challenges. Just know that there's Jesus, there's God at the corner, and it doesn't matter what you've been through. You just have to own up to who God is to your life. And we believe that it's going to be a nice ride. You just leaning on Jesus and telling him to take the wheel. So yeah, it's been a nice time on this show, and we believe that you have a whole lot of thoughts. You could once again drop it in the comments, maybe share this with someone to watch, and just discuss it with your friends. Sometimes don't keep it to yourself. Open up, say it, discuss those things. This is a safe space, and this is Phoenix Place Network on the movie review show, and we're super excited that you're able to watch us. Once again, stay tuned to the next episode. We promise to be back and even better. God bless you.